The era of like mid 2022 through the start of the 2023 season for the San Diego Padres, also known as the crack era, was certainly a time to behold. When the Padres said screw it and told Steve Cohen to go kick rocks, going absolutely insane with making trades and spending like they were on frickin' meth, trading for Juan Soto, spending so much money on free agent players and players they already had, building probably the closest thing we had seen to a so-called super team before the Dodgers said, hold my Lamborghini, and blew them out of the water before this season. What the Padres didn't end up quite working out, at least not yet, trading away Juan Soto just a year and a half after trading for him. Meanwhile, they're still on the books with a ton of big contracts. And as far as a guy like Fernando Tatis Jr. goes, I think he was smart to keep and lock down. He's still so young and so good, but overall the team does have some questionable contracts. Contracts you look at and almost don't even want to think about how they'll look in several years or even a few years. But there's one in particular that may not only be the worst contract on the Padres, but the worst contract in all of baseball. Xander Bogaerts. The Xander Bogaerts signing was one that never was bad because of the player Bogaerts is, but rather because of the details of the contract. For example, someone like Javier Baez, the Tigers could have had him for 2 seasons, and there's a good chance it wouldn't have been a good contract. Okay, obviously it wouldn't have been nearly as bad as the reality of 6 years, but the point is either way, there were signs pointing toward Baez not being a reliable hitter anymore, period. Whether you sign him for 1 or 2 years or the 6 the Tigers actually signed him to, Baez's hitting was never going to age well with how freely he swings and little contact he had been making. In the case of Xander Bogaerts, he's a really good player and has been his entire career. Signing him was never a bad idea. It was the extent the Padres went to make sure they signed him. The most ideal situation for everyone involved would have been for Bogaerts to stay in Boston and re-sign with the Red Sox. Before his final season in Boston, the team decided to not give Xander a 6-year, $160 million deal, a deal he would have taken. The team really botched the situation, leading themselves and Bogaerts to a spot where there really was nothing else that could have been done. By the time the Red Sox were willing to go with 6 years for Bogaerts, it was too late, because instead of it being spring training, it was now the winter, and you now had the Padres, who are high on crack and meth, to compete with. And spoiler alert, nobody was going to win that battle, at least not with Xander. So when the Padres upped the Red Sox offer by 5 years and $120 million more dollars, it just left things to a point where Xander just had to take it. It was a deal he just could not pass up, obviously. But if he and the Red Sox somehow were able to agree on a 6-year deal worth like $160 million or whatever, the reason I say it would have been better for all parties involved is because Xander obviously gets his bag, but the Red Sox also don't have as insanely long of a contract to deal with. But since he signed with San Diego, it's not good for all parties involved, because Xander still gets his bag, even more of a bag, but now the Padres are stuck with arguably the worst contract in baseball for another decade. When the contract was signed and officially underway last year, I'd say the general agreed upon idea was that Xander would be a really good player and fill in at shortstop with Fernando Tatis Jr. now moving to right field, but that as he aged, it wouldn't go so well, and not only would his ability to play shortstop likely die, but so would his bat. I mean, signing a 30-year-old through his age 41 season is never the swellest of ideas. I don't really see a scenario in which that's ever a great light bulb moment. So Xander was good, obviously, he's always been, but it was also very clearly a deal that probably wouldn't age well. And yeah, it hasn't aged well, really at all, except it's even worse because it's only year 2 of this thing. Year 1 was If I told you Tatis would end up becoming literally the best defensive outfielder in baseball after becoming a right fielder, you'd be like, oh, perfect. Xander slots in at shortstop and Tatis is elite at the new position. Everything's fine. But everything is not fine with Xander. Now, his first season as a Padre, year 1 of the 11-year contract, was not bad. In fact, it was actually good. It was a solid season offensively for him. Nothing special or eye-catching, but good at least overall. What it was, when you really look at it, was 3 bad months and 1 pretty good month sandwiched in between 2 amazing months. He started off the year hot and ended the year hot, but throughout most of the season, he wasn't anything that great. But whatever. The Padres as a whole were disappointing anyway, and hey, you'd rather see Xander finish strong than end on a bad note. Was it a great year? No, but he showed signs of what he's capable of. And again, like I just said, finished incredibly strong on a high note heading into 2024. So on comes 2024, and immediately, before anything even happened, the contract just looked like even more of a mistake, which is crazy and also scary since it's so early. I mean, year 2 hadn't even begun at this point. In mid-February, just as everyone is showing up to the first practices of spring training, the Padres decided to make a pretty notable decision, and that was to move Xander from shortstop and switch places with Ha-Sung Kim, making him the shortstop while Xander would go to second. And this happened out of nowhere. Like, Not that Bogaerts had always been the best defensive shortstop or whatever, but they signed him as one and planned for him to be one. This switch made by the team was a last minute in the moment thing, especially when you consider Bogaerts himself didn't even get that much of a heads up regarding the decision. It just came out of nowhere, with it just being thrown upon him, and credit to him, even though he didn't really love it initially, understandably so, he knew it was probably best for the team and was professional about it, making it clear his priority is to win, even if that means switching the position he'd been playing his whole life. And again, look, has Xander Bogaerts ever been an elite defender? No. His offense was always the better part of his game, which is a good thing. And the idea of him not playing shortstop anymore without any context is totally fine. In fact, it's completely valid. It's probably the right choice. It makes total sense, especially when you have Ha-Seong Kim on your team, one of, if not the best infielder in baseball defensively. The issue is just the overall clear lack of direction the Padres had when giving Xander that contract. I mean, we joke, but they literally went crazy and threw so much money at him just to get someone that offseason. Remember, they offered both Aaron Judge and Trey Turner more money than the Yankees and Phillies did, the teams that of course ended up signing those players. They were hellbent on getting someone honestly really just to be able to get a big name player, and they settled on overpaying drastically for Bogaerts and committing for way too many years after Judge and Turner declined their insane offers from the Padres. So what it shows is that the Padres really didn't have a clear plan to have a guy like Bogaerts on their team for the next more than a decade's worth of time. And this is where teams like the Rays sleep well at night, because they never have to deal with crap like this. Well, actually, they did deal with that in the worst way possible, but you get the point. This is where spending money, a lot of money, even on a 4-time All-Star and 5-time Silver Slugger, can be painful and really detrimental to a franchise, especially when you're doing things without a plan, or at least that's what it looks like, and that's what it's resulting as, a mess with no clear path to get out of. And now there's only been bad news to follow. The Padres as a team have been a continuation of last year, just mid. Nothing crazy in either a good or a bad way, but with Xander, it has not at all been a continuation of how last year was or ended. He's striking out a lot, not walking a lot, has the lowest batting average of his career. He's been one of the worst hitters in baseball this year. Like, it's really bad. This just says it all. And if you don't understand this picture, it's basically just confirming everything we already know. He's not hitting the ball hard at all. He's striking out, just providing no value, and then, believe it or not, it got worse. In a recent game in Atlanta, Bogaerts dove for a hard hit ball by Acuna, only to land hard on his left shoulder, staying in noticeable pain and leaving the game. Later getting imaging that fortunately showed no structural damage to Bogaerts' left shoulder, with it later being classified as left shoulder inflammation by the Padres themselves. And thankfully, it actually seems like the best case scenario right now, considering how bad the injury looked, and it was very on par with Trevor Story's injury that he suffered earlier this year, one that ended up knocking him out for the rest of the year. It's almost a carbon copy, just with Xander it happened at second rather than short. So hopefully this doesn't turn out the same way for Xander, but this is just about the last thing this man or the Padres needed right now. He's already not hitting and struggling to the max. Now his shoulder, something you need to feel good in order to hit, is hurt. Again, this is year 2, by the way, and what was expected to happen in about year 6 or so is already happening. But at the end of the day, the Padres have nobody to blame but themselves. Let me know what you think. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.